If you're listening to this story, stay with me because what I'm about to tell you might chill you the same way it chilled me. And if you've ever been a mother, a grandmother, or simply someone who knows the fear of losing someone you love, then you'll understand why I have to open my mouth today. My name is Clarice Granderson, and I used to think there was no pain in this world worse than losing my daughter to an accident. But I was wrong. Because 3 weeks ago, my own granddaughter, Lily, only 5 years old, whispered a truth into my ear. A truth darker than death itself. A secret so small it could barely fit through the lips of a child. Yet so heavy, it crushed my heart right where I stood. And if I hadn't listened that day, if I had brushed it off the way folks told me to, another little girl might have disappeared forever into the dark. Before I go on, if you're here listening, leave me a word down in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me what brought you to this story. I want to know how many people out there have felt what I felt, that terrible certainty deep in your gut that something is wrong, while the whole world tries to convince you you're imagining things. Now, brace yourself, because this story begins in the exact moment Lily looked up at me, eyes full of tears, and said in a trembling voice, "Grandma, I saw a little girl locked inside our house." And from that moment on, every part of my life twisted down a road I never could have imagined in my worst nightmares. That night was damp and heavy, the clouds hanging low over the old row of houses. In the southern outskirts of Jackson, Mississippi, where I'd lived for almost 30 years. I was getting dinner ready, my pot of chicken soup still bubbling on the stove, steam rising up with that familiar smell that always made my little kitchen feel a bit warmer. My house ain't big, just an old wooden place with a small front yard and a porch where I like to sit when the sun dipped low. But it was the place I raised my daughter, and later on, the place I hoped my granddaughter would come visit every weekend. Just as I turned around to cut the stove off, I heard a car brake hard out on the street. It wasn't loud enough to be unusual, but it was sharp, sharp enough to send a cold shiver sliding down my spine. I cracked the door to look outside and saw my daughter-in-law Monica's car parked right at my gate. Her headlights were still on, casting this pale white glow over the old brown, weather-beaten fence, making these strange, blotchy shadows dance across it. I should have felt happy to see her and my granddaughter showing up without warning. But the moment Monica stepped out of that car, I knew something was wrong. She just stood there for a long minute, still holding onto the car door, like if she let go, her whole world might just collapse. The woman who once shined so bright looked worn down, exhausted. Her eyes were swollen, maybe from no sleep, maybe from crying. I couldn't tell. She kept glancing around the little street in front of my house, her eyes full of worry, like she was scared somebody might be watching. I walked out onto the porch and gently called to her. "Monica, baby, you all right?" She didn't answer. She just swallowed hard and reached into the backseat for Lily. My granddaughter, my sweet 5-year-old with those big bright eyes and soft brown skin, just like her daddy used to have clutched her ragged little teddy bear Peanut tight against her chest. That child used to talk all day long without needing to breathe, it seemed. But tonight she was quiet, too quiet, like her voice had been left behind somewhere on the drive over. Monica stepped up the porch stairs, her voice trembling. "Ma, can you keep Lily tonight? I got a night shift." I'd heard that line before. For more than a year, Monica had been tired, busy, pulled in every direction, always running into some night shift she could never fully explain. But this time, something felt different. I looked her straight in the eyes, and it felt like I was looking at a stranger. Of course I told her. Ma's always happy to keep her. Lily clung to her mama's leg, and Monica stood there at the doorway, like she couldn't make herself step inside. Her fingers dug into the strap of her purse so tight the knuckles had gone white. She looked at me, then back out into the dark street like something was hiding out there in the places the streetlights couldn't reach. I bent down to lift Lily into my arms, and the moment I held her, I felt her whole little body go stiff-tight with fear about something she couldn't bring herself to say. I stroked her hair. "Baby girl, you gonna stay with Grandma tonight, okay?" She didn't nod, didn't shake her head. She just buried her face into my chest, breathing short and shaky, like one more question might break her right open. Monica leaned close and whispered into her ear, "Sleep well, baby. Mama'll come get you tomorrow." Then she straightened up and gave me one quick look. In that look, I swear there was something like a cry for help or a warning. I couldn't tell which. "Thank you, Ma," she said, but her voice cracked like it couldn't hold itself together. She turned and hurried off, got in the car, and drove away so fast the tires kicked dust up behind her. I carried Lily inside and closed the door. The living room was lit only by a small yellow lamp. The soft glow hit her face and I froze. Dark circles under her eyes, her cheeks flushed, her little lips pressed tight like she was keeping some heavy secret locked inside. I set her on the sofa, took her shoes off, wrapped her in a thin blanket. "You want something to eat? Baby grandma made your favorite chicken soup." She gave a tiny shake of her head. Just a tiny one, but the fear in it, I could feel it. I didn't push. I just sat with her, turned the TV on, hoping the bright cartoons might calm her down. But she didn't even glance at the screen. She just held Peanut close, staring down at the floor, her small shoulders trembling now and then. I laid my hand gently on her back. "Sweetheart, you're not happy tonight." It took a long while before she finally whispered so soft I had to lean down to hear Grandma. "Don't leave me alone." My heart jumped. "I'm not leaving you, baby. I'm right here. What's scaring you?" She pressed her lips together, hugging her teddy so tight I thought it might tear. Tears welled up in her eyes. I didn't ask again. Kids who've been holding something in, sometimes all they need is time. I stayed with her all evening until she finally fell asleep in my lap near 11. But even in her sleep, Lily curled into herself, breathing fast and shallow like she was running from something in her dreams. Once she whimpered, Don't close the door." I felt my whole chest cave in. The next morning, when the first light came through the thin curtains, I heard her stirring behind me. She sat there quietly, staring into the little cup of warm milk I'd set out for her. I sat beside her. "Baby, did you have a bad dream last night?" She didn't answer right away. She lifted her head just a little, looking at me, then flicked her eyes toward the window like she was scared her mama might appear out of nowhere. Finally, her voice trembling, "Grandma." Mama said, "I can't tell." I held my breath. "You can tell Grandma anything. Grandma's gonna protect you." She clutched her teddy tighter, tears sliding down her cheeks. She tried to speak it, but the words seemed stuck. I took her hand. "Sweetheart, it's okay. You can tell me." A heavy silence settled in the kitchen. Then Lily whispered, faint and broken like a lost wind, "There's a little girl locked in the basement at my house. She cry a lot. She say her hands hurt." I froze. The spoon in my hand slipped and hit the tile with a cold, sharp sound that felt like the whole world cracking. Lily burst into tears and clung to me, shaking like a leaf in a storm. I held her tight, but inside me, fear was spreading wide and fast like a long crack splitting open in the earth. What is Monica hiding? And that little girl, is she even still alive? I sat at the kitchen table for a long while after Lily told me about the little girl locked in the basement. That sentence kept echoing in my head like cold wind slipping through the cracks of this old wooden house. I held her tight, whispering that Grandma's right here. Grandma's gonna protect her. But truth is, my own hands were shaking. Folks might think a 5-year-old could just make something up, but I know Lily. She ain't the kind of child who dreams up monsters for no reason. That sudden fear pulled me back to the days when my family was still whole, back when this house wasn't quiet the way it is now, when it was full of laughter and sometimes even songs from my daughter, Aisha, and my son-in-law, Jamal, the man whose smile shined bright as a Mississippi June afternoon, used to lift Lily and run her around the living room till the dust rose up like smoke. But that was 2 years ago, before a stupid, senseless, cruel accident pushed our lives straight into the dark. Aisha, my baby girl, always changed the room just by walking into it. When she laughed, it lit the whole house up. She loved to dance, loved to cook those spicy southern dishes, and loved telling every little story from her workday, like each one held a joy too big to keep to herself. I remember all those times she set Lily on my lap and said, "Ma, I just want Lily to have a beautiful childhood." And I'd smile back. Baby in this house, everybody loves her enough for the whole world. Jamal was quieter, but he could light up the place in his own way. Every time he came home from the construction site, shirt dusty, sweat dripping, he still had that big, bright grin. He'd scoop Lily up and spin her around until she laughed so hard she couldn't breathe. Watching them always gave my tired heart a little peace. But peace is the most fragile thing there is. That day, Jamal called to say he was working late. The storm had slowed down the site. I told him not to push himself, but he just laughed, "Ma. I know my limits. Don't you worry about me." That was the last time I ever heard his voice. That night, rain hammered the roof and wind slapped against my windows. When my phone rang, I thought it was Aisha asking about the soup I'd been making, but the voice on the other end belonged to a man I didn't know, deep, steady, and so serious it made me freeze. Jamal had crashed on his way home. His truck slid off the wet road and went down into a ditch. It all happened too fast. They said he barely had a chance. I remember dropping the phone, the sound of it hitting the floor echoing like my heart had just been thrown off a cliff. I ran to Aisha's house, but by the time I got there, she was already on the floor, shaking hands, clutching her head. The neighbor told me she'd screamed herself out, then passed out cold. After the funeral, this house, once full of life, went quiet. A heavy emptiness settled in every room, like somebody had opened the door and invited the cold in to stay. Aisha stayed with me for a few weeks, but she barely touched food. She'd hide in the bedroom and cry till sunrise. During the day, she'd stare right past Lily, like she couldn't see her own child. I held my daughter and told her she still had me, but grief, real grief, ain't something you can carry for someone else. One day she told me voice hoarse, "Ma, I can't stay here. Too many memories. I can't breathe." And just like that, she moved out, taking Lily with her. I understood, but it felt like losing my son-in-law stole one piece of my heart and losing the sound of my granddaughter's footsteps in this house took the rest. Time passed and Aisha changed. She talked less, came around less. Whenever she picked up Lily, she'd glance around like someone might be hiding nearby. Her eyes stayed shadowed, her skin dull, and even the rare smiles she managed never reached her eyes. One day I couldn't take it anymore. "Baby, you okay? If you need help, I'm right here." She just said, "I'm fine. Don't worry about me." Then she pulled back slowly, piece by piece, until even weekends with Lily were off limits. I tried not to judge. Maybe she was trying to rebuild herself. But the more time passed, the more it felt like something dark was wrapping itself around her, something beyond ordinary grief. And Lily, she started changing too. She laughed less, jumped at her own name. When I asked what was happening at home, she'd lower her head, hug Peanut tight, and whisper, "I'm okay." But in her eyes, I saw something only a mother, only a grandmother can recognize. A quiet, smothered fear. Even then, I didn't dare let my mind go to the worst. I kept telling myself Aisha was hurting and Lily was just caught in the tide of it. I told myself it would pass, that they'd both heal with time. All those comforting thoughts went up in smoke the morning Lily whispered, "There's a little girl locked in the basement at my house." In that moment, every memory of my happy family, every laugh, every meal, the bright warmth in Jamal's eyes shook like an old film reel burning at the edges. I didn't know what had swallowed my daughter whole after Jamal died. But I knew one thing for sure. Her pain didn't just turn into sadness. It turned into something else, something darker, heavier, dangerous. And Lily was living right in the middle of it. And if Lily was telling the truth, then another child was suffering something far worse. I looked at my granddaughter, her little legs dangling off the chair, her eyes still puffy from crying. She didn't even realize her words had just changed our lives all over again. I held her hand and I whispered, "Sweetheart, Grandma's right here. I won't let anything hurt you." But deep inside, I heard a soft, sharp crack, like the first ice breaking on a winter pond. A quiet sound that warned me I was about to face a truth far more terrifying than the pain of losing Jamal. And every instinct in me, as a mother, as a grandmother, told me, Whatever darkness had its hands on my daughter, it wasn't just in her mind anymore. It was real, and it was dangerous. 3. I sat frozen for a long, long time after Lily whispered that chilling story. That fear clung to my chest like a cold hand, squeezing every breath tight. But that morning, I still forced myself to stay calm to get her to school on time, like sticking to a familiar routine might keep my heart from falling apart. Lily's elementary school was only a few blocks from my house, an old red brick building with the walls faded by southern sun and summer storms. Kids were already crowding the yard, their laughter and chatter loud and bright, nothing like the heavy silence sitting inside me. Lily held my hand so tight it turned my skin white. She didn't skip ahead like she always did, didn't wave to her friends, didn't say a single word. She just stayed pressed against my leg like she was afraid something or someone was lurking out there in the corners of the schoolyard. I bent down, smoothing her hair. Lily, baby. We at school now. She lifted her eyes to mine, those tired, shadowed eyes that looked far too old for a little girl. Grandma, can you pick me up early? Real early, please. That soft plea sliced right through my heart. Grandma will be here, I promise. She nodded and let go of my hand, slowly walking toward her classroom like she was stepping into a strange, faraway world, even though it was the same classroom she went to every day. I couldn't let her words drift away like the cold breeze that morning. I needed answers. I needed to know if her fear was a nightmare or something real. So after Lily went inside, I went to find her teacher, Miss Jenkins, a calm, observant woman with warm brown skin and sharp eyes. The kind of eyes that see straight through the masks children try to wear. She was sorting papers in the teacher's lounge when I walked in. Good morning, Miss Jenkins. Could I talk to you for a moment? She looked up instantly, her face shifting when she saw how worried I was. Of course, I was actually thinking of calling you. Lily didn't look well today. I drew a slow, unsteady breath. Has Lily been acting strange lately? Anything unusual happening at home, Miss? Jenkins put the papers down, pulling a chair out for me. I've been concerned too, honestly. I'm really worried about her. Her words made every hair on my arm stand up. Worried. How she sighed, opened a yellow folder, and slid it toward me. Lily's been drawing pictures that aren't normal at all. I held my breath as she pulled out 6, maybe 7 sheets of paper. Each one was a shaky crayon drawing, but clear enough, a child standing in a dark room, lines around her like prison bars. Another showed a black door. Another tiny hands wrapped in bandages. My body went cold. Oh, Lord, Miss Jenkins continued. When I asked who she was drawing, Lily said, a girl who's locked up. I thought maybe she'd seen something on TV, but her hand was trembling. She kept pressing the dark colors over and over. She wasn't pretending. She's genuinely frightened. I covered my face. Part of me begged to believe this was just a child's wild imagination. But deep down, I knew my granddaughter wasn't making things up. She was too little to invent something so grim. Miss Jenkins looked at me, eyes full of real concern. She's jumpy, flinches when someone touches her, keeps staring at the door like she's afraid someone's coming for her. That's not normal. My throat tightened with a painful knot. I know. I told her what Lily said that morning about the girl in the basement, the crying, the fear. Miss Jenkins pushed her chair back like she'd been hit with a cold wind, pressing her hand to her chest. Dear God. I don't know what's happening with Aisha. I whispered, my voice shaking. But ever since Jamal died, she's been living in a place I can't reach. I thought it was grief. But maybe it isn't. The teacher fell silent for a few seconds before saying quietly, you need to call the police. I looked at her like she'd just told me to jump off a cliff. Call the police if Lily is telling the truth? Then another child is in danger. Her words sliced into me like a blade made of ice. Walking home afterward, I moved slow, not because I was tired, but because my head was spinning. The road back to my house, the old oak trees shading the sidewalks, the wooden houses standing shoulder to shoulder looked grayer than I'd ever seen them. Each step felt heavy, like the ground was trying to hold me in place. Lily's panicked the drawings Miss Jenkins's warning. All of it swirled around me, tightening like a storm cloud. I was scared, but I couldn't stay silent. I needed someone else to hear this, someone who'd listen without assuming I was imagining things. So I went to my closest neighbor, Miss Yvonne. But as I crossed her yard, I heard two other neighbors whispering, "She's been going around asking everybody." Losing her son in law made her lose her mind. Poor thing. She's not old there anymore. My heart clenched. I wanted to turn around and ask them if they knew how cruel they sounded. But I didn't. I just walked past, feeling the kind of loneliness that hits you like a cold wind straight to the bone. When Yvonne saw me, she grabbed my hands tight. "What's wrong, sister?" And when I told her everything, she stayed quiet for a long while. Before saying the one thing that nearly made me cry, "I believe you." Just one sentence. But it felt like a lifeline tossed to someone drowning. That afternoon, I went to the police station, but all I got was suspicion and cold stares. "So your 5-year-old granddaughter hurt another child in a basement. Did you see anything yourself? Any proof?" They said not enough evidence. Said you can't rely on a child's imagination. Said this might just be trauma from losing her father. I walked out feeling like someone had shoved me into the street and slammed the door behind me. Nobody believed me. Nobody believed Lily. And somewhere in the shadows, maybe a child really was crying every night with nobody to hear her. That evening, I sat alone in my old chair by the window, watching the streetlight spill its dull yellow glow over the damp road, and I understood one thing. If I didn't keep searching for the truth, no one else would. Not the police, not the neighbors, not my own family. Just me. And I wasn't about to let the darkness swallow another child. 4. All that afternoon, I couldn't get a single thing done. My kitchen had always been the place where I found a little peace, but that day, even the warm smell of the pot roast simmering on the stove couldn't pull me out of the tight, buzzing panic wrapped around my chest. I kept pacing through the house, feeling like 100 angry bees were stinging me all at once. Nobody believed me, and yet the truth was standing right in front of me. Then, as if fate had decided it was time around 5 o'clock, when the sun was slipping down behind the rooftops across the street, I saw Mr. Carter. My elderly neighbor, 3 houses down, walking slow along the sidewalk, tapping his cane in steady little beats against the concrete. Mr. Carter was one of the few people in this neighborhood who still took his afternoon walks. A tall, dark-skinned man in his 70s whose eyes always seemed too sharp, too knowing, like he understood more than he ever said. Maybe that's why I'd always trusted him more than most folks around here. When he got close to my yard, he stopped and looked at me for a long moment. It wasn't the curious, pitying stare I'd been getting from other neighbors. No, this one felt different, like he was weighing something heavy inside his mind. I stepped closer to the fence. "Evening, Mr. Carter." He nodded back, then asked in that low, gravelly voice of his, "You don't look well at all. What's going on with you, child?" I meant to brush it off with something polite, something simple. But standing under that steady gaze of his, I felt my strength slipping, that mask I'd been trying to wear all day, cracking wide open. My voice trembled. "Lily, she's been saying things I can't sleep over, but nobody believes me." Mr. Carter went quiet. He glanced up and down the street like he was checking to make sure nobody else was listening. Then he tilted his head and lowered his voice. "Come inside. I got something to tell you too." Those words made my heart jump. Inside my living room, the soft yellow light from the table lamp made a small warm circle in the dim space. He eased himself onto my old worn-out sofa, and I sat across from him. He leaned his cane against the table, folded his hands, and said, "You remember last week, that night when the wind was howling something fierce?" I nodded. That wind had rattled my windows like someone was shaking them with both hands. He tightened his fingers, taking a long breath. Well, I couldn't sleep that night. I went to the kitchen to make some tea, then sat out on my porch. And when I looked toward your daughter's house, I leaned forward, heart thudding hard. I saw Aisha bringing a child inside, a little girl, but not Lily. My whole body went cold like my feet had slipped into ice water. You, you sure about that? He nodded firmly. I've been living on this street 40 years. I seen every kid grow up. I know what Lily looks like. This child was smaller, haircut shorter, and the way she walked, like she was scared of something. And Aisha pulled her along real fast, almost dragging her. I covered my mouth, choking back a sob. Lord have mercy. And at first I figured maybe it was some family member, he went on. But I ain't never seen that child in daylight, just that night. And he paused, dropping his gaze. I heard crying, a child's crying. Soft, but I heard it. It felt like the floor disappeared beneath me. Everything Lily had said, every drawing, every tremble in her little voice, none of it was imagination. There was a real child in that house. My hands were shaking so hard I had to grip the arm of the chair just to steady myself. Why? Why didn't you tell me sooner, Mr. Carter exhaled slowly, his eyes turning sad. Because I didn't want to scare you, and I thought maybe I saw wrong. Old men like me eyes ain't what they used to be. But now I know I didn't imagine anything. And you know that too. I covered my face. A hot tear slipped right through my fingers. Aisha, my baby. How did she get mixed up in something like this? Mr. Carter didn't answer. He just watched me with that quiet understanding, the kind that doesn't need words. But I couldn't sit there drowning in misery any longer. His testimony, Lily's trembling confession, those awful pictures together, they pushed me past where fear had held me stuck. Past the place the police had brushed me off earlier that day. I stood up, my voice steadier than I expected. I have to go back to the station. Mr. Carter rose with me, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. Let me drive you. I shook my head. No, I need to do this myself, but thank you, truly. He nodded, squeezing my hand with his warm, worn fingers. You're not alone, child. Those 4 words made something in me ease just a little, like the tiniest bit of light breaking through the dark. By the time I reached the police station, night had fully settled over the city. The neon lights inside washed everyone's faces pale and tired. I walked straight to the front desk, gripping the bag with Lily's drawings. The young officer behind the counter sighed when he recognized me. You're back again. I lifted my chin, looked him square in the eyes. I have new information. A witness. An adult. Something in my voice made him straighten up. A witness. What did they say? He saw my daughter bring a strange little girl into the house, late at night, and he heard crying from inside. The officer blinked, then stood. Wait here. I'm getting the captain. A few minutes later, they brought me into an office, and for the first time since this nightmare began, someone actually listened. When I left the station, the night wind slapped my face, but it didn't chill me anymore. My heart was still trembling, yes, but not from helplessness. It trembled because I was standing at a threshold, the thin line between darkness and the truth. And I knew this was only the beginning. A long, dangerous road lay ahead, full of things I couldn't yet imagine. But for the first time in days, I carried a solid, burning certainty I was going to find the truth, no matter how dark it was. 5. I left the police station late that night, breathing hard like I'd just walked out of a storm. Being heard even just that once made my steps feel a little lighter, but my mind was still tangled in layers of worry, stacked on top of each other. The night fell faster than usual, the moon swallowed by low gray clouds threatening rain. All of Jackson seemed washed in a tired, ashy haze. When I got home, I turned off every light and sat by the window, watching the street lamp glow through the thin fog. My chest ached thinking about Aisha, my daughter. When she was little, she used to be pure light, and now I didn't know what darkness she was drowning in. I pressed my hand to my chest, trying to calm myself when my phone buzzed. A message from Miss Jenkins. I'm here if you need another statement. Lily was still shaking this morning. I typed, thank you, but that single word felt heavy, like a quiet cry for help. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. I hadn't slept, not even a little. Just lay there, replaying yesterday's conversation. Officer Davis, the one who actually sat and listened, said they would look into things. And I knew from years of life that phrase lived somewhere between genuine concern and doing the bare minimum. But the look in his eyes when he heard there might be another child, that wasn't a dismissive look. When I took Lily to school that morning, she clung to me like a shadow. I leaned down to fix her jacket, and my heart cracked straight through when she whispered, "Grandma, don't come late today." She said it like if I came late, she might disappear into some darkness I couldn't reach. "I'll be early, baby," I told her, holding her close. I promise with my whole heart. Watching her walk down that long hallway, small, quiet, alone, I felt a sharp, cold certainty settle inside me. Whatever was happening at Aisha's house, it was getting worse. I planned to stop by the store, but my phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello, this is Officer Davis." His voice was firmer than yesterday. "We need to verify some information you shared. Can you come to the station right away?" My palms started sweating on the steering wheel. A short drive suddenly felt like crossing a lifetime. When I arrived, they led me into the same room as before. This time there was a female officer and an investigator reviewing files on a screen. Davis turned eyes sharper than yesterday. "We checked public cameras near your daughter's street. No clear footage, but we did see two figures entering the house late at night." My breath hitched. "And the neighbor's statement, we just collected Mr. Carter's testimony." He handed me a paper. I read it slowly. Every line hit like a needle pressing into my chest. I saw Aisha pulling a little girl inside the house. Smaller child, short hair. I heard crying. For a moment, none of us spoke. The silence in that room felt thick, like the shadow of something terrible beginning to unfold. The female officer asked gently, "Is there anyone else who might be staying in your daughter's home?" "No," I whispered. "Aisha lives alone with Lily." Davis looked at me for a long moment, then put his pen down. We cross-referenced the description with missing children in nearby states. "There's a little girl named Chloe missing for 14 days. The age and appearance match about 80%. My world tilted. Oh my God. Davis leaned forward, his voice steady. "Look, children's statements aren't enough on their own. But two adult witnesses and a matching missing child report, that's different. We're filing for a search warrant." My hands trembled so badly I had to grip the chair. "Thank you." "Thank the Lord," the female officer added softly. "No one wants to believe this. But if there's a child in danger inside that home, we have to move fast." Davis rose, signaling the meeting was over. "Miss Granderson, we'll call as soon as we have the warrant. And thank you for not giving up." His words cracked something inside me. Tears burned hot behind my eyes. I could only nod. When I stepped outside, the cold wind stung my face, but it wasn't the wind that made my eyes water. It was the weight of the truth drawing nearer. I leaned against my car, closing my eyes tight. And in the darkness behind my eyelids, I saw Lily, clutching Peanut, trembling. And another little girl, a child I'd never met, crying in some hidden room. I opened my eyes with a gasp. I knew the real fight had just begun. That evening, I went to Yvonne's house. She opened the door the second she heard my knock, like her heart had already sensed mine was in trouble. "Any news?" she asked. I told her everything. Her eyes widened with horror before her voice shook. "Dear Lord." "So that child is real?" "Yes," I whispered. "And they're getting a warrant." She grabbed my hand tight. "Sister, whatever happens, I'm right here with you. You hear me? You are not about to walk through this alone." I fell into her arms, a sob caught halfway up my throat. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in front of Jamal's picture on the shelf. "My son," I whispered, "if you were here, you'd know what to do. You'd know how to shine a light in this darkness." The lamp flickered once, then steadied. I stared at Jamal's kind eyes in the photo. Eyes Lily needed more than anything now. Softly I said, "Tomorrow, everything could change. But Lord knows, I don't know which way it's gonna go, Jamal." And when the fear grew too heavy, I folded my hands together and prayed. If there's a child hurting in that house, please, please keep her alive until help gets there. Because I knew one thing with painful clarity: the closer you get to the truth, the sharper the pain becomes. And sometimes those truths can shatter a family or save a soul. If you've listened this far, I have to ask you something. If it were you and your heart told you someone you love was hiding something dark, but do you stay? Would you dare to face it? Tell me your thoughts, because sometimes the answer from a stranger is the very light a desperate heart needs to find its way. 6. The next morning, I woke up feeling like something heavy was sitting right on my chest. I walked to the window, pulled the curtain aside, and saw the sky covered in thick steel gray clouds. A strange kind of silence hung over the whole neighborhood, like everything and everyone was holding their breath, waiting for something to break. I didn't know exactly when the police would go to Aisha's house, but I knew one thing: today was the day the truth would come out. Good or bad, saving or destroying, I couldn't guess. I just knew the biggest fear of my life was standing right outside my door. Around 8 a.m., my phone rang. Officer Davis, we have the warrant. The team will be at your daughter's house in 10 minutes. Do you want to be there? I looked around my home, feeling like I was about to leave the last safe place I had. But right then, something firm and unshakable rose up inside me. I have to go. I started this. I need to see it through. So I answered, I'll be waiting outside. About 12 minutes later, two white and blue patrol cars rolled in at the end of the street. No lights flashing. But the moment they showed up, the neighborhood stirred like a beehive. Doors cracked open, eyes peeked out, then quickly disappeared when they saw me standing there. I clenched my hands together. The morning wind brushed against my neck and made me shiver, but not from the cold. It felt like the last breath before the darkness split open. The officer stepped out. Davis. Two other men and a female officer I hadn't seen before. Davis came toward me, voice firm. We're following procedure. Please stay in the yard. If anything happens, we'll keep you and your grandchild safe. I nodded. Even though he tried sounding calm, I heard the tension hiding under his words. When they knocked, I heard hurried footsteps inside. Then the door swung open. Aisha stood there, her face gaunt, hair thrown back in a messy tie, eyes red like she'd either been crying or awake all night. Her gaze darted from Davis to the officers, then finally locked onto me. Longest on me. Mom, why are you... She didn't finish. Davis lifted the search warrant. We have legal authorization. 3 officers will enter immediately. Aisha's face drained white. She stumbled back, a step, panic rising like a tide. No, you can't go in. The warrant is in effect. Davis cut in. When the officer stepped forward, Aisha threw her arms across the doorway like an animal guarding something deep inside its den. You can't go in. This is my house. You can't. Then her eyes snapped back to me, full of hurt betrayal, raw wounds ripped open. Mom, did you do this? My mouth opened, but words refused to come out. Part of me wanted to hold her tight, tell her everything would be okay, but another part knew that if I hesitated even for a second, somebody's child could pay the price. The officers gently pried her hands from the doorframe. Aisha screamed, begged, cried out. Mom betrayed me, each word slicing right into me like a blade. But I didn't move. My fingers dug into my palms so deep I felt the sting of my nails. Inside, footsteps echoed along the wooden hallway, furniture shifting, doors opening, closing. Aisha sobbing out on the porch, held back just a few feet from me. I couldn't look at her. If I did, I knew I'd break. 1 minute, 2, 3, each second stretched out like a chain, tightening around my throat. Then suddenly, a scream. Not Aisha, not the officers, a small scream. Thin, weak, like a tiny soul that had been trapped in cold darkness far too long. I shot upright. Oh, Lord. Before I could move, the female officer burst out of the doorway, shouting toward the medical van, call EMT. We have a child. My whole body went cold, my head buzzed. I saw Davis running down the hallway, the beam of a flashlight shaking wildly through the dark inside. And then they brought her out. A little girl no older than 6, hair sparse, face streaked with dirt and dried tears, left arm wrapped in filthy darkened bandages, clothes torn, scraped, dusted in grime, bare feet trembling on the porch. She looked around in panic like a baby bird pulled out of a box it had been locked in for too long. I covered my mouth as tears poured down my face. I couldn't breathe. Chloe. It had to be her, the child whose mother had been tearing through 3 states screaming her name for 2 long weeks. As the female officer carried her toward the ambulance, the little girl clung desperately to her collar, whispering through cracked lips, "Don't close the door. Don't lock me in again." My knees buckled. I leaned against the fence, shaking all over. Those words. They were the same words Lily had sobbed in her sleep. I remembered plainly the first night she stayed with me. She cried out in terror, "Don't close the door. Don't lock me in." I had thought it was a nightmare. Now I knew what Lily had been hearing. While the ambulance pulled away, the officers kept searching the house. I stepped back as Davis came out onto the porch carrying a heavy expression. "Miss Granderson, we found several items inside, and you need to prepare yourself." He held up a small evidence bag. Inside was a notebook, brownish red, cover scratched with scribbles. Strange symbols, markings like twisted charms. I stared, my blood turning to ice. "This belonged to Aisha," I whispered. "We found it in the basement," Davis said quietly. "It appears she may have been communicating with or influenced by some kind of extremist group." My heart clenched, twisted. No. No. My child, she couldn't. My voice cracked like glass hitting tile. Aisha stood a short distance away, 2 officers holding her still. Her eyes cut into me, sharp, wounded, furious. "Mom, how could you do this to me, Aisha?" "What did you do?" I cried. I was trying to help her. I was trying to keep her safe, she screamed. But her voice didn't sound like my daughter's anymore. It was wild, broken, distorted. Alshud, like she'd been living in a world I'd never known. And I broke, not just because the little girl had been found, not just because Lily had been telling the truth, not because the truth finally came to light. I cried for Aisha. Because I knew from the moment that basement door flew open, my daughter would never return to being the Aisha I once knew. I pressed a hand against my chest, feeling it collapse inward. That feeling wasn't relief, wasn't victory. It was complete collapse. I turned away. I couldn't watch them handcuff her. Because even though the truth was shining bright as daylight, it felt like I had just lost another child. 7. That night after the police took Aisha away, the house sank into a silence so heavy it felt unnatural. I stood on the porch for a long time watching the car carrying my daughter fade down the dark street. The wind swept across my little yard, carrying the damp smell of dirt left over from the noon rain, and magnolia petals, late season, bruised and falling scattered around my feet. I braced my palms on the old wooden railing, trying to breathe like somebody who'd just outrun a flood. But truth was, I hadn't outrun anything at all. I had only just stepped into the most brutal part of my story. When I went back inside, the house felt bigger than usual, like a hollow cave. Every room held a piece of the day's loss. The living room still had Lily's blanket rolled up on the sofa. The kitchen still had the warming tray I forgot to turn off. And the little corner by the window still carried the memory of the chair where Aisha used to sit when she was still my bright, laughing girl. I closed the curtain, switched on the lamp, and sat down, my hands trembling, like they didn't belong to me anymore. Every moment from earlier crashed over me, Aisha's pale face, her screams as they cuffed her, Chloe's cry from that basement, the terror in Lily's eyes when she heard the police were going to her home. I let my face fall into my hands. In all my years as a mother, I had never seen a day darker than this one. But then I saw another face in my mind, a tiny face inside an ambulance, Chloe. And the tears came harder. Whatever darkness had swallowed Aisha whole, at least that innocent child had been pulled out alive. I told myself, you gotta be stronger. You still got Lily. And Aisha needs you too, even now. The next morning, I went to Jackson Memorial Hospital to see Chloe. The wide hallways rang with the clicking of nurses' shoes, the sharp scent of disinfectant floating through the air, a reminder that in this place, folks were fighting for somebody's life every minute. I stood outside the pediatric room where a nurse said Chloe was being examined. Through the window, I saw her sitting on a hospital bed, clean bandages wrapped around her arm. A nurse was gently brushing through her tangled hair. She wasn't that frantic, terrified child from the basement anymore. She looked out the window with eyes still carrying fear, but holding just a flicker of hope. I was about to turn away when a couple came running down the hall. The woman's hand flew to her mouth, and the man had to steady her as she nearly collapsed. I knew who they were before the nurse even said a word. Chloe's parents. The moment the mother saw her child through the glass, her knees buckled. A cry tore out of her chest, raw, shaking like a soul that had just been handed back a piece of itself it thought was gone forever. The father rushed into the room, nearly stumbling as he threw his arms around his daughter. I stood there silently, hands clasped, feeling something rise and choke in my throat. Then the mother turned and saw me. Her eye widened, not in confusion, but in recognition, like she somehow knew I was part of what brought her baby back. She walked toward me, her hands trembling. Are you the one who found her? I shook my head, my voice soft and tight. No, I'm just the one who listened to what my grandbaby said. And I couldn't ignore it. The father came over to Iseret and took my hand. You saved our daughter. Without you, I don't know how long we would have been searching. I blinked back tears. But deep down, I didn't feel like a savior. Because the truth was, save Chloe, I'd had to lose Aisha, my own child. That night, I went home carrying a weight I couldn't name. I sat in my usual chair, the warm lamp casting my shadow long and tired across the wall, like I had aged 10 years in 24 hours. I opened the cabinet and pulled out an old picture of Aisha from her school days. Her hair pulled up in those thick curls, her smile bright as Mississippi sunshine. Another picture, Aisha holding newborn Lily, her eyes shining with joy so pure it almost hurt to look at. I stared at those pictures, feeling like I was looking at someone else's life. The Aisha now wasn't that girl anymore, and I, her mother, hadn't seen the darkness creeping in soon enough to save her from it. A sob tore out of me. I pressed the frame to my chest. Aisha, baby, where did you go? How did I lose you like this? This pain wasn't like the pain of losing Jamal. It wasn't like the pain of hearing Lily cry in her sleep. This was the pain of a mother realizing her child had been eaten away by shadows, slow, silent, hidden, and she never noticed. I swore to myself, whatever happens next, I will not abandon Aisha. She is my child. Lost or not, she's still mine. The next morning, the whole neighborhood buzzed with whispers. They had heard, not all the details, but enough to stitch together their own stories. When I stepped outside, a few neighbors passed by and caught sight of me. Some lowered their heads, some looked away. Others stood whispering across their yards, their words drifting through the wind, just loud enough for me to catch poor thing. For her daughter to be mixed up in that. Something must be wrong in that family. Oh, I didn't blame them. Not long ago, some of them called me the old woman losing her mind. Their whispers weren't meant to be cruel, just human reflex when faced with someone else's tragedy. But every soft murmur felt like a tiny blade sliding deeper into my chest. I turned back into the house and closed the door. As soon as the latch clicked, the outside voices disappeared and only my own breath filled the empty rooms. That was when I realized I was standing between two worlds, the truth that had finally come to light, and a wound that would never fully heal. Later that day, I went to see Lily. Yvonne was keeping her until everything about Aisha was sorted out. When I walked into the room, Lily was holding Peanut, her eyes sad, but not as frightened as before. Grandma, where's Mama? The question stabbed straight through me. Mama's getting help, baby. Doctors and police are going to take care of her so she can get better. Lily set Peanut aside and looked up at me with those big, earnest eyes, Grandma. I was right, wasn't I? There really was a girl. I pulled her into my arms, breathing in the soft citrus scent of her shampoo. Yes, baby, you were brave. Braver than anybody. You helped save someone's life. She rested her head on my chest and whispered, I just didn't want her to cry alone anymore. My tears fell into her hair, slow, heavy drops like they were falling straight into my heart. I held her for a long, long time, long enough to hold her hurt, my guilt, and the darkness our family had walked through. And I knew even though the road ahead would be long and hard, at least a child had been saved, and Lily, my sweet grandbaby, had found a little light again. And me, I had to learn to stand tall one more time for my child, for my grandchild, and for myself. 8, I thought that after Chloe was pulled out of that basement and Aisha was taken away, things would start getting clearer. But life don't work that simple. The truth can come out in a single moment, but the pain it leaves behind burns slow like a deep bruise or a bad burn that only hurts more once the old skin starts peeling away. 3 days after the search, the whole neighborhood in Jackson felt like it had been swallowed by the news cycle. Local TV vans crawled up and down our little street. Reporters stood right at the mouth of the alley, microphones pointed toward Aisha's house like they were covering some big national scandal. The police had to put up tape and no trespassing signs. I watched it all through my window, shaking and numb at the same time. Part of me wanted to scream at them, tell them this wasn't some story to pick apart or headline to make people click. This was my family, my daughter, an innocent child. But I just stood there with my hand pressed to my chest like I was trying to keep my heart from falling straight out. The only thing that kept me from falling apart completely during those days was Lily. She wasn't unraveling like before. She still had moments where she went very still, like she was hearing some distant crying that grown folks couldn't hear anymore. But there was something softer in her eyes now, something closer to what childhood is supposed to look like. A little bit of light. She smiled a tiny smile when I told her stories. She ate a few spoonfuls of soup. She didn't jump every time the window rattled against the frame. Me, though, I tried to be strong, but every evening as the sky turned that bruised purple, my eyes drifted toward Aisha's house. The basement door was sealed, but in my mind I could still hear Chloe's thin, broken sobs echoing somewhere in that dark. Around the 4th day, the police asked me to come in for an update. When I stepped into the office, Officer Davis nodded in greeting. His face was serious as ever, but heavier somehow. We finished searching the house and reviewing some of the items we took in. I figured you'd want to know what we found. I swallowed hard. Part of me wanted to bolt out that door, but my feet stayed planted. Davis set a larger evidence bag on the table. Inside were 2 old notebooks, some loose pages, and a cracked cell phone. On the first page of one notebook, written in smeared black ink, was a name, Eli Thornwell. "Who is that?" I asked, my voice barely more than breath. Davis laced his fingers together. "A figure tied to a small extremist group we've been tracking for a while. A splinter group, disorganized, but with a history of targeting people in psychological crisis." The room felt like it was shrinking. "You mean to tell me?" "Aisha got mixed up with them. She was in contact with them," Davis said slowly. "Some of the messages on her phone talk about saving children's souls, atoning through sacrifice, things like that. It strongly suggests she was manipulated for a long time." I put a hand over my chest because my heart felt like it was stumbling out of rhythm. Aisha, my strong, proud girl, who had picked herself up after so many hard knocks. How did she end up in the hands of people like that? Davis went on. "But we don't believe she did all of this alone. There are signs someone else had been in and out of the house. Footprints, objects that don't belong to Aisha or Lily." Who, I asked, the word coming out sharp. "We don't know yet, but one thing's clear." He held my gaze. "This goes deeper than you think." My eyes blurred. I didn't know if I wanted to hear another word. I wanted to believe Aisha was just a broken-hearted woman who made one terrible decision at the worst moment of her life, that she only wanted to protect Chloe. But the evidence they'd found painted something else entirely. My child had been pulled into a darkness bigger than anything I had ever imagined. When I left the station, the sky opened up. September rain in the south doesn't always come like a storm. It falls in heavy, stubborn sheets that don't want to stop. I stood under the overhang watching the drops explode against the concrete, sounding like little hearts shattering on the ground. The next day, I went to the hospital to see Chloe. This time, the doctor said she was stable, calmer than in those first days. They'd moved her to a quieter room. When I stepped in, she was on the bed, carefully folding a piece of paper into a little crane, concentrating like it was the most important job in the world. When she saw me, she flinched a little, but didn't pull away. She studied my face for a few seconds, then whispered, "You're Lily's grandma." I smiled and sat in the chair by her bed. "That's right, baby. I'm her grandma." She set the paper crane down and asked, her voice barely there, "Is Lily still sad?" The question tightened something deep in my throat. "She's doing better," I said softly. "You helped her more than you know." Chloe dropped her gaze. "I'm sorry I made everybody scared." "No," I cut in, gentle but firm. "You don't apologize for that. None of this is your fault. You're just a child who got trapped in something you never should have been part of. You survived. You're a strong baby, stronger than you think." I smoothed a hand over her hair, then stepped out to let her rest. As I walked away, I heard her call ma'am. "Thank you. If it wasn't for you and Lily, I don't know what would have happened to me." I froze in the doorway for a second before I could move again. That evening when I got home, Yvonne came over with a pot of hot jambalaya. She sat beside me, her hand resting lightly on mine. "Sister, I know you're carrying a lot," she said. "But listen, none of this is on you." I looked into her eyes and broke down. I I couldn't save my own daughter, Yvonne. She wrapped her arms around me like I was a child who'd lost everything. "She's still alive. She's getting treatment. As long as there's life, there's a way back. Don't you forget that." I nodded, but my heart felt like stone. I had helped save one child, but in the process, I had lost a piece of my own. That night, the wind rustled through the magnolia trees outside. I sat in my rocking chair, the lamp casting a soft gold glow across my worn, calloused hands. I flipped through an old photo album, Aisha at her 6th birthday party, Aisha at high school graduation, Aisha cradling newborn Lily, the brightest flash of joy I'd ever seen in my life. I whispered to her picture, "I still believe in you, Aisha. Whatever happened, I know your pain was real. I will not abandon you, not ever." I closed my eyes and took a long breath in the quiet of the house. Outside, the night rain tapped steadily against the roof and the porch, like the soft murmur of a sorrow that didn't know when it would end. But inside that little wooden house, I stayed there, holding onto a small stubborn flame of faith in my chest, refusing to let it go out, no matter how hard the wind outside tried to blow it away. 9. In the days that followed, my life seemed to shift into a strange rhythm, slow on the surface, but full of restless movement underneath, like water running under cracked ice. I'd lost Aisha to the hands of the police, but I'd watched Chloe be saved. Lily no longer woke up crying in the night, but she still clung to my hand every time we walked past her mama's house. The neighborhood had stopped whispering after a few days, but those sideways glances, pitting, uneasy, judgmental, still slipped out from behind curtains and front porches whenever I stepped outside. I lived in Jackson far too long not to recognize the way folks change. The way they look at me now ain't the same as when they thought I'd lost my mind, but it ain't much better either. They don't think I'm crazy anymore. No. Now they look at me like I'm a witness dragged out of a tragedy they don't know how to face. And me, I'm too far gone in my own storm to care what anybody says. The only thing I think about every morning is Lily. A week after everything happened, Lily had her follow-up appointment with the child psychologist. I drove her there under the pale morning sun. She sat in the back seat, holding Peanut, squeezing that old stuffed bear like it was a life preserver. Every time I glanced at her through the mirror, I saw those big eyes staring out the window. Eyes that had seen things a child her age should never have to hold. The appointment went well enough. Lily didn't talk much, but at least she was willing to try. The doctor told me she'd need time, a good amount of time, but said Lily had a strong foundation for healing because she still had family and an environment steady enough to lean on. I felt my eyes fill up. family. Those two words, for me now, they're just me and Lily. That afternoon, the hospital called. Chloe's parents wanted to meet me. They asked me to come to the little garden outside the building, a quiet place tucked under the shade of eucalyptus trees, with a few wooden benches scattered around. When I walked up, they both stood at once. Chloe's mother rushed toward me and wrapped her arms around me without a single word. I could feel her shaking, feel that overwhelming gratitude she didn't know how to put into sentences. Miss Granderson, she cried, we don't even know how to thank you. I shook my head. Please don't thank me. If Lily hadn't spoken up, I wouldn't have known anything was happening. Chloe's father placed a hand on my shoulder, his eyes bright behind all the exhaustion. But you believed her? You did what other people wouldn't. A child is alive because of that. We'll carry that gratitude for the rest of our lives toward you and toward Lily. I bowed my head. No more words would come. I just squeezed his hand back. Then Chloe's mother said softly, we want Chloe to have another grandmother, someone besides her biological ones, someone she can see and feel safe with. Would you be willing to be that person? I froze. Such a simple invitation, yet it cut deep and healed deep all at once. For a moment, I saw Lily and Chloe playing together in my yard, two little girls who had both carried wounds, now running under the sun like they'd finally been given their childhood back. I nodded. I'll always be here for her. A few days later, Chloe was discharged from the hospital. Her parents brought her by so she could see Lily. When their car pulled up in front of my porch, Lily ran out first. She paused when she got close, and a small smile tugged at her lips. Chloe stepped out, holding her mama's hand, but her eyes searched for Lily before anything else. The two girls stared at each other for a few seconds like they shared a secret the rest of the world wasn't allowed to touch. Then Lily ran forward and took Chloe's hand. Chloe squeezed back and nodded slow and sure. I stood there watching them, and it felt like witnessing a tiny miracle. No crying, no panic, no shadows from a basement door, just two children, soft as morning light, trying to heal simply by standing together. I sat down on the porch steps and let them play beneath the magnolia tree, blooming out of season. Somebody once told me children have ways of healing that grown folks will never understand. Watching Lily and Chloe, I finally believed it. That afternoon, while the girls splashed around near the garden spigot, I sat with Chloe's parents at the wooden porch table. We didn't talk about the investigation. We didn't talk about Aisha. We didn't talk about the darkness behind us. Instead, they asked about Lily, about her favorite foods, about the little stories that make up a family. Chloe says she feels safe around you, her mother said, her eyes shining. She said, you're like a little light in the dark. I pressed my hand over my mouth before I broke down. For almost 2 weeks, I had felt myself sinking lower and lower, like I was slipping underwater with no way back up. But hearing those words, it felt like someone reached down and pulled me toward the surface just long enough for me to breathe again. I don't know if I deserve that, I whispered, but I promise I'll do everything I can to make sure both those girls grow up safe. A few weeks passed. Lily began improving in ways nobody expected. She laughed more, slept deeper, no more screaming in the night. The hospital told us Chloe was healing too steady, stronger, willing to talk to her doctor more each day. When Lily went back to school, she didn't cling to my hand this time. She walked slow but steady, then turned around and said, Grandma, I'm okay now. 4 tiny words, and I almost cried right there in the middle of the schoolyard. Miss Jenkins came running out, hugged Lily, then looked at me. She's stronger than the whole class put together, you know. I smiled. But that smile carried a bitterness only a grandmother could taste because Lily's strength had been forged from a fear she should have never had to endure. As for Aisha, I visited the detention center every weekend, even though they warned me it might take time before she was stable enough for family contact. The first time I saw her through that glass, my heart clenched so hard I thought it might stop. She wasn't my Aisha anymore. Her eyes were tired. Her curls were unkempt. Her cheeks had sunk in. When she saw me, she froze, then looked away like she was ashamed to let me see what she'd become. I pressed my hand against the glass. I'm here, I whispered. I'm not going anywhere. She didn't speak, but her shoulders trembled. And that was enough. Because a mother's love doesn't vanish just because her child fell. It only steps back long enough to find its way back to her. And if she could still tremble when she saw me, then hope wasn't gone. My life never returned to what it was before. Some wounds don't close all the way. Some losses don't ever come back whole. But every morning I watched Lily run across the yard. Every afternoon I saw Chloe sitting under my porch coloring in the warm light. Every weekend I saw Aisha lift her eyes just a little higher when I stepped into that visitation room. And I knew light was making its way back. Not the loud blazing kind. A softer light, the kind that flickers like a candle that keeps burning even when the wind outside is howling. And sometimes, that's all a mother like me needs to keep living, keep hoping, keep reaching out to gather whatever's left after the storm has passed. Life still hasn't found its old shape again, not completely. But I can feel myself taking those first small steps out of the shadows. Every evening I sit out on my porch, listening to the wind slip through the magnolia leaves, and I think about other mothers, women who might be facing the same kind of quiet hurt I once carried. Women who don't know who they're allowed to cry to, who don't know what to believe, who don't know whether the child's whisper is a warning from the dark or just a bad dream. I understand them in a way I never wanted to because there was a time when I didn't trust my own instincts either. There was a time I trembled at the thought, if the truth is cruel enough to break my whole family apart, do I still dare to face it? But now when I look at Lily sleeping peacefully beside me, I know I made the right choice. Not because I was braver than anybody else, but because I listened even when my heart was shaking. Chloe was saved. Aisha still has a chance to come back to us. And Lily, my sweet Lily, she found the quiet peace I thought we lost forever. I'm not telling this story because I want somebody to call me strong or call me brave. I'm telling it because there are voices in the dark, soft, fragile voices. And if grown folks don't stop long enough to listen, whole lives can get left behind a closed door. And I keep wondering, if I had stayed silent that day, what would today look like? If you were me, caught between the love you have for your child and the fear of the truth, what would you have done? Tell me in the comments. Because sometimes the way you see things might save someone else who's slowly drowning in a fear the rest of the world can't see.